I will say that there are a few cons associated with portable mortgages that we need to consider. One, most of the banks won't be happy with the idea that millions of individuals and homeowners with this lower interest rate are able to extend this interest rate to a new property, and that in turn affects the profitability of these banks to a point where they're probably going to push back on this idea. And I would assume that the banks do have the current administration's ear to a point where they probably would much rather prefer 50-year mortgages in comparison to these portable loan options that they're floating around. So one of the things that the current administration is bringing to the table in order to help the housing crisis that we're dealing with is the idea of a portable mortgage. And it's pretty much as it sounds. It's the ability for you to, as a homeowner, take your existing mortgage rate with you if you decide to move homes. But it also could mean assuming the mortgage rate that the previous homeowners had on the home that you're actually purchasing. And I don't necessarily know if that concept would work. In theory, it sounds cool, but in reality, I don't think that's going to be something that makes sense. And we're going to talk about why.
As the housing crisis continues to strain first time buyers or baby boomers looking to downgrade, the Trump administration is floating some new ideas, like portable mortgages. A portable mortgage is just what it sounds like, being able to take the mortgage rate with you if you move, or allowing buyers to assume the mortgage rate the previous homeowners had on the home.
It sounds like a good idea. Say you're a homeowner that has an interest rate between 2 and 4%, and you're typically reluctant to move from your current home to a new property because you're going to lose that beautiful interest rate you have. You're going to find yourself with your new property with an interest rate of 6, 7%. And so it frees these homeowners that are in a way trapped because they have such a good interest rate on their property. And that ultimately, in theory, should free up housing stock and increase housing stock for a potential first time home buyer.
So what you're trying to address here, obviously, is people who are able to refinance at some point in time and were able to get a very low interest rate around that 3%, and now maybe want to move or need to move, but are just really hesitating doing so because their new mortgage may likely carry an interest rate, especially for a 30-year, somewhere between 6 and 7%. But how many lenders are going to be willing to do that is really the tricky part in all of this.
I will say that there are a few cons associated with portable mortgages that we need to consider. One, most of the banks won't be happy with the idea that millions of individuals and homeowners with this lower interest rate are able to extend this interest rate to a new property, and that in turn affects the profitability of these banks to a point where they're probably going to push back on this idea. And I would assume that the banks do have the current administration's ear to a point where they probably would much rather prefer 50-year mortgages in comparison to these portable loan options that they're floating around. Portable mortgages could also have an effect of raising the median average home price even higher. If you're able to carry this 2 to 4% interest rate over to another property, then there may be a lot of competition for the properties that are on the market, specifically from these homeowners that are once again trapped with this interest rate. And so therefore you would see the price points of these properties potentially increase. I also think that this hugely favors current home owners in comparison to first time buyers. The individuals that are looking to get into the market are still going to be faced with these higher interest rates, 6%, 6.5%. And so they're opportunity to purchase properties becomes smaller due to the fact that, yeah, there may be somebody willing to sell their property to move into another property, potentially a larger property, but there may be another buyer of that property that also has a portable interest rate that wants that house. That individual will potentially be able to outbid the first time home buyer that does not have the ability to have that lower interest rate, and so therefore, their monthly payments are higher and so on and so forth. So I don't necessarily see that as a benefit for new home buyers.
The federal government can do things and the state government is doing things, but at the end of the day, 80% of it comes down to our local communities that decide what we do or do not build and how fast we do it and have a big impact on the cost of that housing.
And she is 100% correct. If you as a city are wanting to help solve the housing crisis, update your zoning to in turn allow for more housing to be built. There are a number of developers and investors that have really good ideas, and also more importantly, or just as important, the funding and the know-how to execute on bringing more housing to these communities. However, if zoning is restrictive and not allowing for you to, add more density within the community in a thoughtful manner, then you're, as a city, hurting your ability to attract more residents, and you're not giving any solution to the housing crisis that we're having as a country. So extremely important to have your city council consider zoning adjustments in order for housing to be easier to build within your neighborhoods. Yeah, I don't think portable mortgages is something that we're going to see. I do think that the 50-year mortgage, as much as I'm not a fan of it, is more realistic than a portable mortgage. From the administrative side, if you're a banking institution, that just seems like it would be a nightmare to have to manage in-house, to a point where you would much rather prefer, as a banking institution, the 50-year mortgage in comparison to the portable option that is being floated by this current administration. I don't think the portable mortgage idea is going to get any wings. I do, however, think that the 50-year mortgage concept, as much as I'm not a fan of it, is more realistic. What are your thoughts? I would love to hear them below. I'll see you in the next video.